Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm giving you guys my top 5 favorite scenes from the Batman. So now that the Batman's been out for a few days, I wanted to go over my top 5 favorite scenes. Now, as of the time I'm recording this video, I've seen the movie 2 times. And the second time I was watching it, I paid more attention to individual scenes, trying to find out which ones I like the most. So I've curated a list of my top 5. This video will be containing massive spoilers, so if you haven't already seen the movie, go check the movie out and then come back to this video. Before we get into it, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe and turn notifications on so you don't miss any time of a video where I go live. Also, leave your top 5 scenes from the Batman in the comments down below. Both wasting more time, let's get into it. So at number 5 is this scene that I like to call the hush scene / revelation. And the reason I call it hush is because on the screen, whenever Bruce is finding out about his family's past and that kind of stuff, it does say hush because obviously Thomas Wayne was giving the reporter hush money. And like I mentioned before, this is the scene where basically everything in Bruce's life turns out to be a lie for him. Obviously he goes to talk to Alfred later, and I'll be mentioning that scene later in this video, but at this moment in the movie, everything that we know as the audience and everything that Bruce knows is a lie. It really does feel like a complete 180 character moment, and I'm so happy with how they did this execution of putting Martha and Thomas Wayne out there as bad people. More Thomas than Martha, because we actually do get Martha's family's past exposed as well, the Arkhams, and how she had to go to a mental institute because her mom was crazy. Her mom killed her father and then she committed suicide, and everything in this moment just feels like they took the story up to a whole other level. Before, it was like, okay, yes, it's this detective story, it's a Batman on a journey to stop the Riddler, but then in this moment it really becomes personal for Batman, and that's why I like it so much. I think this also puts Batman more at the forefront of the movie, because up to this point, Bruce Wayne didn't really have an impact on the story, and so Bruce Wayne from this point forward has more of a personal thing with the Riddler rather than just being Batman versus a criminal. But for 4th place, my 4th favorite scene from the Batman is the chase sequence with the Penguin. Now 4th place and 3rd place are very close for me, but there's one thing in 3rd place that puts it just slightly above 4th place. But 4th place is again the car chase scene with the Penguin. This is right after Batman and Gordon go to a stakeout to find where they're making the drops and stuff like that. At this point in the movie, they're trying to find El Rata Alata, which is the winged rat, and obviously in this moment they think that Penguin is the winged rat. And just the way this scene sets up so much, the way that it just transfers over time, how they first arrive there and then Catwoman arrives, Batman's like, this just got complicated to Gordon. Gordon has no idea what he's talking about. And then Batman and Catwoman have this first interaction since Catwoman left Batman after taking the contact out of her eye. This one moment between Catwoman and Batman is really great. And then also the reveal of Anna being dead, that's a phenomenal reveal. And I almost jumped out of my seat because I didn't expect them to just show a dead body like that. I really love what they did with this scene as a whole. And then just the introduction of the Batmobile. It's one of the best superhero thing entrances ever. Like, the Batmobile is not a superhero itself, but it's one of the best entrances of any like object in a superhero movie, in my opinion. It's just so well done. He does like a fake startup so it scares everyone there, and then the Penguin realizes, oh, this is what we're doing. So then the Penguin gets into his own car and then the chase goes on. Now I have one slight critique, and I would say my top 3, I have no critiques of the scenes. That's why this falls just below the top 3. And my critique is that sometimes in the chase, the cinematography is really messy. What I mean by that is in this movie, there's a lot of POV shots, and this scene specifically, some of the POV shots don't necessarily work for me because you see like the windshield wiping and then you see a bunch of rain, there's gunshots everywhere. Like sometimes it's just a little bit too much on screen for me in the moment, so it doesn't really work. But other than that, I really do love it. For the minimal dialogue that's in the car chase scene, I love it. I like the way that everything piles on top of one another. It's also the perfect length of a car chase. It didn't feel too long or too short. It felt like everything was paced perfectly within the fight itself. But now to my top 3 favorite scenes from the Batman. And number 3 is going to be the Arkham scene where the Riddler and Batman first have their face-to-face interaction. And the reason why this is above 4th place is because strictly of Riddler's performance here. Now, first of all, this is the first time that Riddler and Batman get face-to-face. They've been on the phone like 2 or 3 times, I think, but this is the first time Batman and Riddler are in the flesh, and you can just feel the tension. I will say my number 1 spot I feel like has the most tension in the entire movie. That's why it's at number 1. But this one has a lot of tension, especially for Batman and Riddler being on 2 opposite sides of the glass. I can't talk about this scene without mentioning the amazing sound design in this scene. Whenever they're having that dialogue conversation back and forth, it feels like a normal conversation. But about halfway through the first time I watched this scene, I realized that whenever it's the same conversation over and over. It feels like they recorded it just like a normal scene, but anytime that it's on the Riddler side of the glass and it's the Riddler looking at the Batman, Batman's audio is muffled like we're actually hearing it through the glass. And then on the opposite way, whenever it's Batman talking to the Riddler and we're seeing the Riddler through the glass, it's Riddler's audio that's muffled. And it's just so well done in my opinion. And sometimes it even switches between whenever the Riddler's talking, it switches from a Batman POV to a Riddler POV. The sound editing alone is why it's a top 3 scene in the entire movie in my opinion. But as a whole, it's just carried by Paul Dano's acting. It's an absolute acting clinic in general, because even Pattinson is great in this scene. Whenever he goes up to the glass and he says, "What have you done? What have you done? What have you done?" He says it like 3-4 different times, and you can actually feel the tension. And then when Riddler realizes that Batman didn't find out what the actual plan is, he starts laughing and going crazy, and then he gives him the hint. It's just so good. I think it's just a perfectly crafted scene, especially for the first time a villain and hero are interacting on the same screen at the same time. Now in second place for me is the hospital scene between Alfred and Bruce. Now this is right after Bruce went to Carmine Falcone and they had this whole conversation, and Falcone was like, "Oh, your father wasn't as good as you think, blah blah blah, don't sleep over it," whatever, right? And then he goes to Alfred and says, "You lied to me, Alfred." And this scene in the trailers, I was waiting for this since the trailers, and I absolutely was so excited to see Bruce's reaction and knowing that Alfred knew about all of this the entire time and he didn't tell him. The tension in the scene is just so well done, and this scene alone elevates Bruce's character so much. And there's one specific line, I forgot the exact words that he says, but he says something along the lines of, "I thought I had mastered the fear, but now it's coming back." Something along those lines, where he's talking about how the feeling of when his parents died are finally coming back to him, and this characterizes Bruce so well in my opinion. This does so much character work for Bruce himself that we don't need Bruce the entire movie, since it's such a Batman movie. Also, this is the biggest impact Andy Serkis has on this movie, and I really like it. Andy Serkis is a phenomenal actor, and he really shows it in this scene. And what tops this scene off to being super perfect is the very ending, whenever Bruce is holding on to Alfred's hand, but he looks in the sky and he sees the bat signal. And that shot of Bruce just turning his head and looking up, and then us seeing the bat signal in the sky, it really just kicks off the third act so well. But now to my favorite scene from the entirety of the Batman, that has to be the funeral scene. Now, as a whole, I love the funeral scene from the very beginning when Batman walks in, he's faked out by the Selena Kyle girl, all that kind of stuff, and to the very end whenever the DA blows up. But even if I had to choose one of the two parts from that, I would say after the Batman enters and there's that tension of the riddles and stuff like that, like I'll consider the entire funeral scene as the funeral scene from the very beginning to the very end. But even just looking specifically after Batman arrives to the City Hall, just the acting by the person who plays the DA, as well as Barbara Pattinson in this situation, even the Riddler over the phone on FaceTime, it's just so well crafted. The tension, the cinematography, everything is just so well done in my opinion. It's also our first live interaction between the two. As I mentioned before, the prison scene was the first face-to-face interaction, but this is the first live reaction between the two that we're seeing, and I really do like it. I don't know how to really describe it. I think it's mostly just the tension, because the first time I watched it, this was the first time in the movie where my heart was absolutely racing. Obviously, we know the DA is gonna get blown up. We actually saw that in the trailers, but what was more interesting to me was the DA actually gonna spill the beans, and was the Riddler still gonna kill him off because the Riddler's just crazy like that? There's just so much to unpack in the scene, and I think the biggest thing that carries it is the tension. This has to be one of the most heart-racing moments that I felt in any superhero movie in a very long time. Yeah guys, those are my top 5 scenes from the Batman. Let me know your top 5 scenes from the Batman in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.